We spend all our time here. I want to make a paradise.
She redid all of it, every last detail. And she breathed life back into every room.
Are you happy?
I love you. Please, come in.
Hello.
Hello. He's a stranger. We're just gonna let him sleep in our house. Hello.
Hello.
Did you know he had a wife?
Welcome to the PrePost film review. I'm Matt Stevenson.
And I'm Jon Asquith. We've got a bit of a bonus episode for everyone today. This is a little different from the normal format of the PrePost film review. Normally, if you're a new listener, we would talk about the trailer and then talk about the film itself. But for the movie we're going to be talking about today, which is the new Darren Aaronofsky film, Mother, we're just going to jump straight into our full spoiler review. Partially because we were not super keen to watch the trailer for this one. We wanted to go in surprised. And also its release just kind of snuck up on us. So scheduling wise, just kind of turned out that way as well. Just so everyone knows the reason why we're doing this. So sit back, relax, and let's talk about some horrific, disturbing imagery in the new Aronofsky film. So I'm going to ask you, Matt, what you thought of this. And I guess because we're not doing the trailer thing, like, did you go in with any sort of knowledge or expectation?
That's a good question. In terms of what I went in knowing, basically nothing, which was a rare treat, really. I sort of hadn't watched any trailers whatsoever. As you said, the film kind of just snuck up on me. I didn't even sort of realise... I think I must have vaguely known that he was doing something new, for a year or whatever, but it wasn't really on my radar. And it kind of just popped up, and I was able to avoid everything, like marketing material, trailers. I don't even know if I'd seen a poster for it. I think actually I'd seen that there was like an illustrated one where Jennifer Lawrence is like holding her
really
heart
cool.
that has been pulled out of her chest. I think I might have seen that. So yeah, I sort of had no idea whatsoever in terms of what to expect, which I think is kind of the perfect way to see this film, just because of the way it kind of unravels, and there's this weird sense of unease, and sort of she herself, Jennifer Lawrence's character, sort of doesn't really understand, or it feels like she doesn't understand what's happening for a lot of the time, especially at the beginning, and it's all quite mysterious, and the opening is very weird and allegorical. But I'm getting ahead of myself, I guess. In terms of if I liked the movie, yes, but it's a fucking tough watch. It took me a while to process it, and there were moments while I was watching it, the sort of brutality and confronting nature of some of the stuff towards the end made me question whether sort of the means justified the end in terms of what the film was trying to say. But I think I eventually sort of came down on the positive, and I sort of admire it for its crazy, brash boldness. And I think where the film didn't work for me, I don't think it's a perfect film, is in the kind of chaotic repetition that sort of by the end, I think it perhaps spends one too many times where things get a bit nuts, because there's kind of like this series of escalating sort of gatherings in the house, I suppose, that kind of get more and more crazy, and the final one just goes absolutely fucking bonkers, and it's kind of like, it escalates so quickly, and it's such an assault on the senses. I kind of wish that it had spent a little less time doing that, or we'd kind of already seen a lot of that sort of imagery, and it was hammering the point home a bit hard at that point, I thought. Even though where it ends up going at the end of those scenes with the fucking baby and herself is confronting and successful, I would say. Like, I liked it. But what about you, John? I mean, this is a hard film to watch in a lot of ways, but interesting. So I'm curious what you thought, and I guess also what you thought it all means, because I had a very specific reading of it actually, and my friend who I saw it with had a very different one when we came out, and I think they both work perfectly well, which is another one of the reasons that I sort of decided that I really like this film. So yeah, what did you think?
Yeah, it's funny, like the reaction to this movie, as we were recording this, it's been out for maybe a couple of weeks or something, is so, divisive. Like it's almost 50-50. Like people hate this movie.
Understandably, I would say.
Yeah. And some people absolutely love it. So I knew that going in, that it was pretty divisive, but nothing else. I was assuming that there'd be some dark stuff in it, and some weird psychological weirdness, just because of it's sort of what Aronofsky likes to do. So yeah, overall, I really, really liked this film. Well, I almost would say I loved it, I think. It blew me away, and I think similar to you, because it just like swings for the fences. You know?
Definitely.
It is on 10 the whole time, and I can understand how that annoys people and puts them off in terms of thematic stuff, in terms of violence, in terms of like the harshness of the cinematography at times. But it all worked for me. I really, really loved it. And I agree that there's like 5 different readings you can have of what's going on in the movie, and they all fit into neat little places. And I think that's not because it's so ambiguous that you can read anything onto it. I think that's because it's well constructed and well made. I thought the performances were really strong. Jennifer Lawrence, like the whole movie almost is just her face, as she walks around. And she just does such an amazing job of being kind of lost and wanting to be creative and being stopped from being creative and being confused and being angry. And I mean, these, I guess, sound like simple things, but the movie's so tightly packed around these, how she's feeling and what's happening to her and what's happening to the house, which we can get into how that all connects. But she was really good. Javier Bardem was great as well. And that it's kind of just them. I mean, there's obviously supporting cast as well, but I love the look of it. Maybe if I was going to be picky, there's a few CG shots that are too CG.
That's true. Yeah.
But then again, if I think about like how you get money to make this, probably you can't get enough. Like it is big budget for what it is, and for what is in it. Normally no one would touch it, with that would be able to finance kind of the amount of CG that is in there. So I can sort of forgive it for that. And yeah, like you said, very confronting. But I think it does earn the confronting imagery in it, and it is making a strong point. And I've seen some. I haven't read too many reviews because I didn't want to be swayed about my own opinion, but I saw a couple of things on Letterboxd of people saying there's a particular scene towards the end with the baby, and then with something that happens to Jennifer Lawrence. I mean, we could just talk about it. Yeah, the baby gets eaten. It's torn apart and eaten. Yeah, and then she gets the shit beaten out of her, and you see it
like full frontal close up on her face, just her getting kicked in the head. Yeah,
exactly. I think, and I've seen some reviews saying that people are like, no, fuck you, I don't want to see this. The movie turned me off then. But that is exactly the point. And I think if you can't handle seeing that, considering what this movie's about, I think, then like the movie worked. You know what I mean? Just because you didn't like it doesn't mean it's not good. So I just saw it last night as of this recording, so I'm still processing it. But yeah, overall, definitely, I think it's a really, really good film. and what a risk for him to take as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you said, it's impressive that this even got off the ground, given the content of it. And I agree with that, especially those final scenes of her getting brutally beaten are meant to be confronting, and they're in no way glorifying anything or making light of anything. You're meant to be horrified by it, and not only that, it's not that it's just a plot point that has to happen. It's all there as a metaphor for the deeper messages that the film's trying to say. Like, it's there for a purpose, not just for shock value, even though it is meant to shock you at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, did you have a specific reading of the film? Like, was there one that you thought was stronger than the others, or that you latched onto more than the others?
There were two for me that I was jumping back and forth as I was watching. One is clearly this sort of treatment of women and what we take from women and expect them to do, and particularly men, how they historically have treated women. So there's things like that. Her creative project is the house, and you have Ed Harris's wife is trying to tell her to have kids and all this stuff. Like, why are you following your own passion? You should be having kids. And then she's constantly cleaning up after people and trying to feed them and looking after them and just sort of quietly suffering. Her husband is quite neglectful and sort of takes from her when he wants things. He kind of uses her as his inspiration, but then just quickly forgets her when he gets attention from someone else. There's also debate. Well, okay, so there's that side.
Yeah.
But then to me, that mixes also with this idea of creating, whether it's creating life or the husband's trying to create his poetry, or an idea, like creation as just forming ideas, and how an idea can get spun into something that it wasn't intended to be. So there's all this stuff with his words and how it kind of turns into this almost like religion, and gets taken out of context, and then there's like wars that start over it. So there's all that stuff as well. But then there's also her creation and her idea that people want. So it's almost like this idea of fan culture and consuming, and people are just like rabid to get near either a celebrity or someone they like, or it becomes less about art and more about wanting things. And then with the literal, consuming of the baby and all that stuff. And then when she finally... And so this is where they kind of come together, the creation and the idea of women's kind of suffrage, is she finally stands up for herself and gets the shit beaten out of her because they're like, you can't do that. You don't deserve to do that, That's sort of where I'm coming from. Those sort of idea of creation / ideas and how they form and go out into the world, and then this kind of idea of women's suffrage throughout history. But then I know there's all this nature stuff that people are saying as well. So I hope that wasn't too rambly, but that's kind of where I'm coming from, Matt. I'm super curious whether you're on the same track or you've got a totally different...
No, we as usual, we're like almost exactly on the same track. That was the kind of the same reading that I had as well. Specifically, the stuff to do with creation and being trying to create something and give it out into the world, and like the weird fan culture consuming and that sort of things. But the alternative reading, or the other reading that my friend had when we saw it, was almost 100% religious. That Javier Bardem being like God, and Jennifer Lawrence representing something to do with like nature or the earth, and how it's kind of like being ravaged. And there's like very literal biblical references, like the brothers are like Cain and Abel and all this stuff that I just did, like nothing religious ever crossed my mind at all watching the film. But when he came out and we were talking about it, like there's all these things that fit perfectly into that reading that I thought was really, really clever.
Yeah. Yeah, I that did cross my mind a couple of times. But I almost didn't want to read it that way, so I didn't go too far. Yeah, a little bit, and I don't know if that's a bad way to watch it, but I did notice that the two brothers, the first group ends with a flood they break the
Interesting,
the sink, and all this water comes, and then it sort of all happens again. And then you have like the wars, which I guess are kind of like all the wars throughout history, and the idea of religions sort of causing these. So it's like, is it pro-religion or not? It doesn't seem like it.
No, I don't think so. But I don't think it's necessarily negative either. This is what I found really interesting about that reading. Because if Javier Bardem is meant to represent like a god-like figure, then he's not a nice god-like figure. No. He's pretty horrible. Which I guess is...
And it is that thing of like, I'm the only god, you got to pray. Like the Christian God is like, it's all about me, But then at the same time, he's like always talking about forgiving them and giving them shelter.
There is a goodness, like there's something noble about his want to help, even if it's the repercussions of that are very negative, especially towards Jennifer Lawrence.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's fascinating. I really like...
Yeah, that is a really interesting reading, for sure. And her as nature, does make a lot of sense, I think. And that we're mining all her resources, and the house is kind of her and all that sort of stuff.
The other biblical thing as well was when that weird scene where Ed Harris is like vomiting into the toilet, and he like covers the wound on his side, which is kind of like Adam, and how God used his rib to create Eve. So it was like his rib had been, and then that's when the wife comes. So she's like Eve.
Oh shit! Yeah, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't read that. I think I read that somewhere. I obviously didn't think of it at the time, but there's lots of little things like that. But also, just personally as well, I really liked the first sort of half, or maybe first two acts, when there is a bit more like surreal weirdness, like she finds that weird thing in the toilet that kind of just like squirts blood and
that was so weird.
It's like really gross.
Really cool though.
And I loved
that scene.
The house itself and where the blood had pooled on the floor, and it kind of created this permanent wound in the woodwork. And the scene where it kind of drips down into the light and explodes into the basement, that then sort of reveals this weird,
just amazing
door thing in the concrete. It's hard to describe if you haven't seen the film, but it's just very striking, creepy imagery, which I really love. Yeah,
so well realized. The movie in general was shot so beautifully, I thought.
Definitely. The colour palettes and stuff of the house itself, I thought was really cool.
Yeah,
it looked great.
Yeah, no, it looked amazing. And yeah, there was a lot of really striking stuff. There's also a shot early on where she like flicks the guy's cigarette lighter into the wall, and the house just absorbs it.
I don't remember that.
Is that a thing, or does she just flick it behind a cabinet? And I was like, oh, it went into the house.
Oh no! I thought it just fell down. I know what you're talking about now. I thought it just fell down behind the cabinet.
Oh, maybe it just fell down.
maybe the wall ate it. I don't know. The wall does apparently have like a beating heart inside that she keeps like.
Yeah, well, I thought like, because I'm sure she flicks it in, and then she could like has one of her little things where she has to drink her potion.
Oh, the weird yellow potion. Yeah.
Yeah, like she. Oh, but maybe I don't know. I need to see it again now. Yeah. I'm not sure, because then she finds it later. It's like down in a, or is that where she flicked it? You know, she finds the cigarette later.
I don't know.
Maybe I just wanted it to be like
a bit
that.
Weirder than it was. Yeah. I do. The only other nitpick I would have with it, and it's not. I think it ultimately succeeds despite this, but I think it's almost like a trait of Aronofsky in general when he gets into this weird surrealist stuff. I think it's kind of probably a bit apparent in The Fountain too, though I haven't seen that for a long time, is that he gets oddly kind of specific with his surrealist stuff that can sometimes feel a bit grating to me. Like the weirdly focusing on specifically drinking that weird yellow liquid that doesn't come of anything, or even the sense that the house is a living thing, which is like it has this like cool creaking weirdness to it, but then like literally showing you a beating heart when you zoom into the wall and stuff. Like, I think eventually
I see what you mean.
it kind of works in this case, but it's like borders on almost being silly or something, like a bit too literal with its metaphors or its imagery.
Yep, I can see that.
But I think it goes so far and becomes so bonkers by the end that it sort of earns those literal moments.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they're not enough to detract from the overall experience.
I'm so glad it turned out to be such a rich metaphor of a film and not just a literal story, because at the beginning when he sort of you see from Javier Bardem's point of view as he sort of places this crystal down and the house transforms, I kind of just thought it was going to be like a literal fairy tale about him bringing his wife back from the dead, and she was this weird like, you know, doll
creation.
Robot woman that was just not 100% real, and she would discover that throughout the film, and that would be the kind of story. I was so glad that's not what it turned out to be.
Yeah, I thought a similar thing for a little while, that perhaps she was like a writing of his that he managed to bring to life, or something weird. Yeah, as you say, like some fairy tale thing. But yeah, it was good that it wasn't. And I think fairly quickly you realise that this is sort of a dreamlike existence and house. And particularly Jennifer Lawrence, there's something, you know, she does seem confused, and ultimately you realise it's because her life was only created that morning in some senses. I mean, she has a memory of before, but I mean, that's all obviously kind of hazy and thematic, but it does a good job of putting you in her perspective, where it's like there's familiar things everywhere. We all know what a house is, and there's a field outside, but things are a bit off, and like these people are turning up, but where are they coming from, and why are they acting strangely, and why is Javier Bardem like never with her and kind of goes off? And I just think it does a really good job of that kind of dreamlike state where things are constantly changing, but you're the constant. You know, Jennifer Lawrence is the constant, and things are kind of moving around her, and she's confused. And did you make much? Okay, so you were talking earlier about, you know, in the third act, stuff goes really nuts. It escalates really quickly. Did you have any other sort of further thoughts on that?
In terms of
that, maybe it felt a bit too much.
Well, I think that's kind of what I was suggesting at the beginning. That's the only sequence where it felt like there was a bit too much. I mean, I felt the earlier scene with the party where everyone was kind of, that itself goes pretty nuts, and that was more effective. And I know that the final one is trying to introduce a lot more things, like you said about the wars, and there's very kind of like literal representations of this escalating conflicts and the religions growing in this weird way, but it's very rapid fire, and there's the sort of weird stuff with Kristen Wiig, who's the publicist, and then she's there like executing people, which seems strange. Like I didn't quite get that. I guess it's like religious extremism or something, you know, like it's taking things way too far. That would be the only criticism I would have with the film, like proper criticism I would have with the film, I think, is that sequence. Because I think perhaps it's just moving too quick for me to like digest it all. Perhaps it'll work better on a subsequent viewing, but in the moment I was sort of having trouble keeping up with all the different stuff that's happening, and it's very sort of bombastic and aggressive in its camera movements, and shit's flying everywhere and exploding, and you know, you're whipping around corners, which is obviously intentional, but it's hard to like digest in the moment, I think. What about you? Were you more taken with that? Did it work better for you?
I think by that point you're fully aware that this is not real necessarily, you know, and so that escalation I was okay with it because it was almost like we're jumping through time in some ways. I do think just oddly specific, having Kristen Wiig was distracting.
Yeah.
I think they probably should have cast someone else there. Even though she did she was fine for the couple of minutes that she was on. That just felt a bit strange. I really liked that section actually, and that sort of chaotic filmmaking was very, as you say, very threatening, and I was sort of like hunched down in my seat, like half covering my eyes because of all the weird, messed up stuff that was happening, and kept waiting for something horrific to happen to Jennifer Lawrence, which it does. What did you make of the very end? So she burns the house down, and he isn't hurt at all, and then he pulls out her heart crystal. It sounds so weird to say, and then we start again, but it's a slightly different woman at the end.
That's actually a very good question, because I had a very whiplash reaction to that, because I didn't like it at first. I mean, I really liked all the heart stuff and her sort of relinquishing that. Like he even took that from her. You know what I mean?
Yes, yeah.
Even when she was like a fucking charred corpse, he was still trying to draw some sort of creative inspiration from her. I like that. Yeah. But then when he sort of takes the crystal and puts it back, I thought it was just going to wipe the slate clean and she was just going to wake up as herself again, which I didn't like. But when the woman woke up and it was a different woman, I really liked that.
Yeah.
I thought that was great.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was really subtle too. Because it looked
very similar,
like Jennifer Lawrence. Yeah. And for a second I was like, hang on, is that her? No, it's not her.
Yeah, well, I guess once you have the full reveal, it's obvious it's not her. But before that, it looks so similar to her as she's sort of lying in the bed. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. Do you make anything of that? Because I'm actually I'm a little confused by what the ending is actually trying to say, other than this is sort of a cycle that. I guess I didn't read much more into it than that, in the sense that he, with at least the sort of reading of it being about him as a creator and sapping the life out of everything that around him, it's just like this endless cycle that he's now gonna use up another woman in exactly the same way, because he'll never be satisfied, and it's just gonna be this endless repetition. But the fact that it's not her going through, I think that's more powerful, that he's just this endlessly destroying all these innocent people in a way is much much stronger ending than having Jennifer Lawrence be caught in a weird loop, which is what I thought it was going to do.
Yeah.
Did you have anything deeper than my very shallow, obvious reading of the ending?
No, I didn't. No, that's why I was wondering whether you picked up anything else from it. I assumed sort of the same thing, that it's an endless thing that he's sort of constantly doing, and he's aware of the whole time.
Yes.
You realise at the end that he knows what's going on.
Yeah.
Which makes it even more sinister in many ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love the way he's portrayed in this film, because there's so much, like you said, that is quite sinister and fucked up about what he's doing. But, like I said before, the motivation behind a lot of his actions is very selfless. And, a lot of the time I was sympathetic to what he was saying. Or, the fact that he was so willing to try and help people. It was almost being too kind. You know what I mean? It was frustrating because he wouldn't stop being nice. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just, exactly. I don't know. It's just
and at her expense.
Exactly. It's this very weird kind of. He's a very weird kind of monster.
Yeah. Much like the Lord, I suppose.
Exactly.
It's so funny. I can see so much of that now that you've brought it up, Matt. I was just thinking, he could write before they have their kid, which is the Old Testament, right? And then when she's going to have the child, he writes again, which is the New Testament, which is all about Jesus and all this stuff.
Interesting.
There's just a lot there. I don't want it to just be that, though.
But I don't think it is. But that's why I really like the film, is because I think there's so many rich readings. I don't think there's one.
Yeah.
In
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're totally right.
Because the house itself doesn't quite gel with that reading, because the house seems to be alive, and like the weird yellow drink and I don't know, there's like specifics in there that don't mesh 100% with that reading. So I don't think that's meant to be the sole way to look at the film. Though I think it's obviously very intentional that is meant to be a possible reading for the film.
Yeah. There's a lot in there, you know. As we said at the start, you know, there's different interpretations and many just within our own thoughts as well. One thing this movie did very well, I thought, was made me hate people.
Definitely.
What we do and how selfish we are and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, maybe, I know the movie might be criticised for being on the nose about that kind of stuff, but it really worked for me. I just felt so cynical about what we take, and, you know, made me think about climate change and all this stuff, and just made me really angry. And then the movie ended, Matt, and there was this girl a couple of seats in front of us. I saw this with my wife. She really enjoyed it too. And this girl, she there's a uni near us, and I'm pretty sure she has to be a film student, and a first year film student. And she was there with her mum, and she stood up really loudly, and she was like, "Oh, well, it's just a big lazy metaphor for how men treat women." I thought it was pretentious and very lazy. She said it so loudly, and I almost said something because
I wish she did.
Because she was with her mother, I didn't, because her mum was like, "Oh, I thought it was very creative," and it was like, you are. The movie was talking about you for half of this.
Yeah, like the irony is right.
And this is your response. Get it.
She's like not entirely. Obviously, that's part of the film, but part of
it is a part of it.
But she's missing a whole lot of what's in there.
Yeah, and I was so into the movie, and you know, when you like, there was just a lot of passion and risk and talent that went into this, and it just and I'm sure we all do it, but I hate instant dismissiveness, you know, and the fact that she had to proclaim to everyone that it was lazy. It's like, you can not like it, but it's not lazy. Yeah. It's well made. So let's just all calm down here.
That's very true. And I think like this is a perfect example of what we often harp on about, John, in terms of you know, a film that takes risks and is bold and different and, you know, willing to go places and say things that most films aren't. Like, something like this should be celebrated, whether you think it's successfully does those things or not. I think is, in a way, slightly irrelevant. Like, the fact that it exists is a minor miracle. Like, it is, I cannot believe that this got made with, I guess it's probably without Jennifer Lawrence or, you know, big names attached to it, just wouldn't have. Yeah. But, it's astounding.
Absolutely. And in wide release, too. Yeah. And, you know, it's bombs, but of course they were expecting that. Like, that's no surprise to anyone. I totally agree. And I think it's completely understandable if you don't like the movie. You can hate it. That's totally fine. But you can't... Yeah, you can't call it lazy, and you can't just dismiss it and say that it should never have been made, because you're right. Like, things like this are very rare, and it's just cool. It's cool that this is out there, and lots of people are seeing it because of Jennifer Lawrence, and they're walking out just like shrugging their shoulders, like, what the hell, you know? And that's cool. I like that. I really like that.
Yeah.
To see me.
Come quick! You're insane! You're insane!
All I'm trying to do is bring life into this house. Open the door to new people, new ideas. I'm so sorry.
Get out of my house! You give and you give and you give. It's just never enough.